Well, it is now time to begin the session number 3 with the title of Paradigm Shift to Finance 4.0, Korea Africa Digital Finance Status and Vision. Well, I also look forward to the content of this session very much because it spans from this policy, finance, fintech, digital ecosystem, and also credit solution that will satiate us with our curiosity for the knowledge. Now it is time to invite our speakers to up onto the stage. So the speakers for session number 3, we would like to invite you to come up to the stage and get seated. And while waiting for our speakers to come forward, let me introduce our moderator for the session. Well, actually, session 3 will be chaired by Mr. Patrick Olomo, head of the Economic Policy and Sustainable Development Division of the African Union. But unfortunately, due to his prior commitments, Mr. Olomo couldn't be physically present with us today in Korea. However, he is joining us remotely via video conference to fulfill his role as a session chair. And also, we are delighted to have Mr. Manuel Moses, CEO of the African Trade Insurance Agency, connecting virtually to deliver his presentations. So we will have a hybrid mode of the session 3 with moderator and a speaker connected remotely, and the other speakers present here in person for the discussion. And unfortunately, we were not able to give you ample time for free discussion yesterday, despite of the very interesting topics. But I am happy to let you know that you can have ample time for the discussion on highly diversified and also interesting topics spanning from finance to the investment. All right, it seems that everyone is ready, and let me see if our moderator is ready too. There. Hello, Mr. Olomo.
Hello, Madam Chair. Yes, the moderator is ready and set to start the session. Thank you.
Okay, then now the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much once again, and allow me to take this opportunity, first of all, to thank His Excellency, the former President of Ghana, for the very, very, very insightful speech that he just delivered. I think the speech has set the tone to what the vision and the aspiration of the Africa-Korea relationship should be in the next decades to come. First, he alluded to the need for a transformative partnership that is aimed at accelerating growth, not only in Africa, but in Korea and also worldwide. And we really appreciate that and thank him for that insightful presentation. Now, coming back to our session, I would like to just quickly, Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen, allow me to tell you that Africa today stands at a very critical point of its history, because you can see that with the cascading crisis that we are faced with. We have the COVID-19 pandemic, we have the geopolitical context that is also adverse to Africa, and climate change that is posing new challenges to the continent. You can see that we are at the center of the heat, and therefore there is need for us to strategize to see the actions that are needed to make sure that we are able to build a sustainable future. This session today is at the center of that strategic thinking, because it allows us to look at one of the critical points that Africa should focus on, which is digital finance. And when we talk about digital finance, you can see that the context today is framed in a way that will allow Africa to accelerate its growth and to pave the way to a sustainable and prosperous future. When you look at the dynamics, and I would like to refer to the speech of His Excellency Dramani of Ghana, when you look at the trends today, you will see that there are 4 major trends that are going to drive Africa's growth going forward. The first trend is the African Continental Free Trade Area. And as he said, the Continental Free Trade Area is a market of more than 1.4 billion people today, with an expected population of 2.7 billion people in the next 2 decades. Secondly, we have the drive for sustainability with the endowment of the continent that is rich with minerals, strategic minerals that are, driving the sustainable development agenda of the world. And thirdly, we have the issue of investments, because the investment landscape is changing, and we can see that there is a renewed commitment now to accelerate investment in strategic sectors such as food security and other industrial development sectors. Finally, we have the digital sector that is also taking prominence within the continent. And you can see that since the COVID-19 pandemic, digital sector in Africa is evolving at a pace that is outpacing, other regions of the world. So there is an opportunity here. So the session is truly at the center of the major drive that Africa is seeing today. Without any development, allow me to present the first speaker of our session. Mr. Seung Lee is a banker, a Korean banker that works at the Economic Development Corporation Fund, which is, the constitutional loan of Korean government to assist developing countries in paving the way to sustainable development. He is also a key actor that supports Africa in its economic transformation drive. So without any further development, allow me to give the floor to Mr. Lee for his presentation. And I would like to remind our presenters that the presentations are delivered in 10 minutes to ensure that we are able to have time for discussions with the audience. Mr. Lee, are you with us? If you are, the floor is yours.
예, 안녕하세요. 저 방금 소개받은 수출입은행의 이상윤 팀장이라고 합니다. 제가 가나에서 3년을 근무했었는데 그때 이제 언론으로만 존 마하마 대통령님을 뵀었는데 오늘 저기 한국에서 이렇게 실물로 직접 뵙게 돼서 너무 영광이고, 이런 귀한 자리에 초청해 주셔서 감사드리며 지금 이 시간에는 대아프리카 EDCF 차관 및 정책금융 솔루션이라는 주제로 말씀드리겠습니다. 먼저 저희 수출입은행에 대해서 소개해드리고, 그리고 저희 수출입은행이 지원할 수 있는 금융 및 그리고 기술 협력 툴에 대해서 말씀드리고, 그리고 EDCF에 대해서 말씀드리고, 그리고 마지막으로 파이낸싱 솔루션에 대해서 말씀드리겠습니다. 먼저 저희 수출입은행에 대해서 잠깐 간략히 소개해드리겠습니다. 저희 수출입은행은 1976년에 설립된 공적 수출 신용 기관이고요. 당연히 이제 메인으로 하는 일은 이제 우리 기업이 외국에 해외 수출할 때 필요한 금융을 지원을 해주고 있습니다. 예를 들면 이제 해외 인프라, 해외 건설, 해외 인프라, 해외 플랜트, 선박 등 이런 주요 수출 산업 등과 함께 또 해외 투자라든지 아니면 해외 자원 개발 할 때 저희가 금융을 지원을 해주고 있습니다. 그리고 저희가 이제 그 2개의 기금을 정부로부터 이제 수탁받아서 운영을 하고 있는데요. 하나는 이제 대외 경제 협력 기금이라고 이제 EDCF 하나를 저희가 이 기금은 이제 개도국의 그 유상 차관을 지원해 주는 기금이고요. 나머지 하나는 이제 남북 협력 기금이라고 IKCF, 이거는 이제 남북한 대북 사업을 이제 지원해 주는 기금입니다. 저희 수출입은행은 해외에 지금 한 28개 정도 해외 네트워크를 가지고 있고요. 아프리카에는 지금 탄자니아, 그리고 에티오피아, 그리고 가나 3곳에 저희가 사무소를 지금 운영하고 있습니다. 다음으로는 이제 저희가 아프리카에 저희가 지원해 줄 수 있는 툴에 대해서 잠깐 말씀을 드리겠습니다. 저희가 세 가지 금융 툴이 있고요. 2가지 정책 자문 툴을 가지고 있습니다. 하나는 이제 저희가 수출 금융, 저희 은행의 메인 업무인데요. 수출 금융인 엑스포트 크레딧을 가지고 있고요. 이 엑스포트 크레딧을 통해서 이제 그 아프리카 개도국 정부들이 한국 기업으로부터 플랜트라든지 기자재를 이제 수입을 할 때 그 수입 자금을 저희가 지원을 해줄 수 있습니다. 지원 사례를 예를 들어서 말씀을 드리자면 나이지리아 LNG 플랜트 사업에 저희가 한 3억 7,500만 불을 엑스포트 크레딧으로 지원을 해줬던 적이 있습니다. 그리고 EDPF는 저희가 이제 개발금융이고요. 이거는 이제 EDCF만큼의 그 장기 저리의 자금은 아니지만은 OECD에서 정한 ODA 요건에 부합하는 그 기준에 맞는 양호성 자금을 제공을 해주는 개발금융 툴이고요. 이제 지원 사례로는 저희가 보통 EDPF로는 이제 아프리카 개도국 정부가 그 인프라를 할 때 인프라 건설 자금을 주로 지원을 해주고 있고요. 주요 지원 사례로는 이집트에서 그 룩소르 하이댐 철도 현대화 사업을 한 적이 있는데 그 사업 관련해서 저희가 한 6천만 불을 EDPF로 지원을 해줬던 사례가 있습니다. EDCF는 유상 원조 자금이고요. 여기는 후에 다시 자세히 말씀을 드리겠습니다. 그리고 저희가 이제 금융 툴 외에 두 가지 정도 이제 정책 자문을 제공하는 툴이 있는데요. 하나는 KSP고 하나는 EIPP인데 KSP는 날리지 쉐어링 프로그램이라고 이제 저희 한국의 개발 경험을 해외의 협력국의 수요에 맞게 맞춤형으로 이런 정책 자문을 무상으로 제공해주는 프로그램이고요. 현재 아프리카에는 한 84개 사업 정도를 KSP 사업으로 지원을 해줬습니다. 가장 최근에 지원해줬던 사례로는 가나 스마트 시티 이니셔티브 지원 사업을 KSP로 지원해줬던 사례가 있고요. 그리고 이제 EIPP는 KSP와 약간 유사한 사업인데 가장 큰 차이점은 KSP는 주로 정책에 대한 자문을 지원을 해준다고 하면은 EIPP는 인프라에 대한 정책 및 기술을 자문을 해주고 있습니다. 그리고 KSP가 한 건 그리고 1년에 걸쳐서 해준다고 하면은 EIPP는 약간 다년간에 걸쳐서 여러 건의 사업을 종합적으로 지원을 해주고 있습니다. 예를 들자면은 이제 인프라 구축이 필요한 사업을 발굴도 해주고 그리고 FS 지원도 해주고 그리고 또 재원 조달 방안도 마련을 해주고 그리고 실제로 이 사업이 사업화가 될 때까지 필요한 자문들을 토탈 원스톱으로 그렇게 솔루션을 제공을 해주고 있습니다. 아프리카에서는 케냐 콘자 스마트 시티 개발 사업을 이 EIPP 사업을 통해서 지금 지원을 하고 있습니다. 다음으로는 EDCF 저희 나라 유상 원조 자금인 EDCF에 대해서 말씀을 드리겠습니다. EDCF는 말씀드렸듯이 이제 저희 나라의 그 유상 원조 자금이고요. 이제 주로 87년에 설립된 자금입니다. 주로 지원 분야는 이제 보건, 상하수도 그리고 에너지 등 경제 사회 인프라를 지원을 하고 있고요. 금리는 연이자율 최저 0.01% 그리고 만기 최대 40년에 매우 양호한 조건의 장기 저리의 양호성 차관입니다. 저희가 EDCF에서 지금까지 전 세계 58개국의 503개 사업에 한 230억 불 정도를 지금까지 지원했고요. 작년에는 한 23억 불, 24억 불 정도, 올해는 한 30억 불 정도를 목표하고 있습니다. 아시아 쪽 비중이 높고요. 62% 정도, 61%. 아시아 쪽 지원 비중이 높고 아프리카 26%, 그리고 중남미 그리고 9%. 아직 아프리카 지원 비중이 당연히 아시아에 비해서는 낮은 편인데요. 이 비중은 점점 증가하고 있습니다. 분야는 교통 37%, 그리고 보건 15%, 상하수도 13%, 그리고 에너지 10%로 주로 교통 분야 위주로 좀 지원을 많이 하고 있습니다. 말씀드렸듯이 아프리카 쪽으로도 지금 저희가 지원이 계속 증가하고 있는데요. 지금 저희가 아프리카에는 19개 국가 그리고 104개 사업 60억 불 정도를 지원을 했습니다. 국가별로는 이집트, 탄자니아, 에티오피아, 가나에 좀 지원을 많이 했고요. 분야별로는 앞에 말씀드렸던 분야와 비슷한데 교통, 에너지, 보건, 상하수도 이쪽에 지원을 많이 하고 있습니다. 마지막으로 이제 EDCF의 파이낸싱 솔루션에 대해서 말씀을 드리겠습니다. 이제 성공적인 개발 협력을 위해서는 이제 아무래도 맞춤형 금융 지원이 필수적인데요. 저희 수출입은행에서는 이제 양호성 차관인 EDCF 그리고 준양호성 자금인 EDPF, 개발금융인 EDPF 그리고 저희 수출입은행의 본연의 업무인 수출금융 이것을 혼합해서 복합금융을 통해서 각 사업별로 그리고 발주처별로 그리고 수원국의 니즈에 맞는 맞춤형 금융 패키지를 제공을 하고 있습니다. 저희가 그 두 가지 정도 저희가 복합금융을 지원한 사례를 이제 말씀을 드릴 텐데요. 첫 번째 사업은 EDCF와 그리고 EDPF가 공동으로 지원한 이집트 룩소르에서 하이템까지 연결하는 철도의 현대화 사업입니다. 이 사업은 저희 EDCF가 어떻게 협력국의 대규모 메가 프로젝트를 펀딩 없이 지원할 수 있었는지를 보여주는 좋은 사례인데요. 이 사업은 총 사업비 5억 불 중에서 이집트 정부가 2억 불을 부담을 하기로 하고 나머지 3억 불을 이제 우리 정부에 전액을 좀 지원을 해달라고 요청했던 사업인데요. 당시에 저희 EDCF는 사실 3억 불 정도 규모까지는 지원을 했던 실적이 없기 때문에 저희가 이제 그거를 EDPF랑 같이 공동으로 패키지를 짜가지고 지원을 함으로써 수원국 정부의 금융 수요에 맞게 그 수요에 맞는 대형 사업을 지원할 수 있었던 사업입니다. 다음으로는 이제 이집트 카이로 메트로 3호선 사업인데요. 이 사업은 EDCF와 그리고 수출금융, 복합금융이 협력국의 금융 비용을 낮추면서 그리고 거기에 참여하는 기업의 금융 경쟁력은 높여줄 수 있었던 좋은 사례입니다. 당시 이 사업은 한국 컨소시엄이 수출입은행의 수출금융 자금으로 이제 이 사업의 자금을 재원을 조달하겠다고 그렇게 파이낸싱 플랜을 짜서 이집트 정부에 제출을 했었는데요. 당시 프랑스 경쟁사가 양호성 차관을 포함한 되게 파격적인 금융 조건을 제시를 하면서 그때 저희 한국 기업의 수주 가능성이 다소 불확실하게 됐었는데요. 그래서 저희 수출입은행에서는 수출금융만 가지고 이제 지원한 게 아니라 EDCF 자금까지 결합을 해서 금융 패키지를 재구성을 해서 금융 경쟁력을 보강함으로써 한국 컨소시엄이 최종적으로 수주할 수 있게 좀 기여한 사업입니다. 이렇게 앞선 두 개의 사례에서처럼 저희 수출입은행은 다른 기관과 달리 양호성 차관 그리고 준양호성 차관 그리고 저희 수출금융 이렇게 총망라해서 수원국에 맞는 그런 사업에 맞는 종합 금융 패키지 제공이 가능한 기관으로서 이런 저희가 개도국 사업에 그런 금융 수요에 최적화된 복합 금융을 지원하고 있다고 저희가 좀 자부할 수 있을 것 같습니다. 이상으로 저희 한-아프리카 EDC 차관 및 정책금융 솔루션 발표를 마치도록 하겠습니다. 경청해 주셔서 감사합니다.
Thank you very much for the presentation. And I can see that you stick to the 10 minutes that were allocated to your presentation. So I thank you for that. You have highlighted key strategic sectors in which Africa has an interest in developing a relationship with Korea. You alluded to the transport sector, you alluded to energy, and also we are foreseeing to see the partnership certainly going in the direction of productive transformation to see how to better take advantage of the potential of the African continental free trade area. As we said, Africa is the land of investment opportunities. So therefore, we invite you to continuously, working with the continent to accelerate, investments. Now I would turn to another presenter, and that presenter is also a strategic player in allowing the continent to accelerate, digital finance, and not only digital finance, but finance as a whole. He is also, that institution is also working, closely with partners such as the Exim Bank, the Korea Exim Bank, and we would certainly like to see the partnership deepening and even widening. in terms of the scope of interventions going forward. The next speaker is Mr. Manuel Moses. He is the Chief Executive Officer of the African Trade Insurance Agency, the ATI, which is a close institution that works with the African Union Commission in accelerating, investment in the continent. Allow me to give the floor to Mr. Manuel Moses for his presentation. And Mr. Manuel Moses, are you with us? Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, I am, and thank you so much, Dr. Olomo, for the kind introduction. Thank you so much to all the participants. I will stand on the same existing protocols. Thank you to former President Mahama for the inspiring words. Thank you to my colleagues who are on the panel. I am so proud to be amongst such an esteemed panel. I wish I could be there in person, but due to conflicting activities, I had to join virtually. I hope that the next one will happen when I'm able to participate in person. So allow me to talk about our institution, introduce our solutions that we hope will be useful to the business community, especially the community coming from South Korea who are looking at participating in the opportunities that the African continent present. So I am from the ATI. ATI stands for African Trade Insurance Agency. It's an agency that was created after a study that was conducted by the World Bank, which was requested by a few African countries that were wondering how to attract more foreign direct investment into the region. The study realized and recommended that there was a need for our creation to provide solutions that stand in the gap to promote trade and investments between governments and the private sector. We were given the mandate to focus on the commercial, but also the developmental angles of promoting investments. You will understand as business people in this room that every investor or every businessman is a concern about what happens to their investments, what happens to their trading if the original assumptions they made do not turn out to be accurate. It could be for reasons in their control or outside their control. So there's always an element of risk. So this is why we were created. I'm proud that my previous speaker from Korea Exim Bank is also addressing the same challenge from the angle of the Koreans. Africans needed to have their own Pan-African ECA, and we do play that role for Africa. We are also co-members of the BEN Union with the Korea Exim Bank, where we are sharing notes and how to promote best practices in our area. Now, a little bit about ATI. We have now become one of the largest development financial institutions, if we measure by portfolio size, in Africa. To give assurance to investors, we obtained a rating, and our rating is one of the highest rating African institutions. We've been rated by Standard & Poor's as A stable and by Moody's as A positive. These ratings have been like this for the last 10, 15 years, just showing our robustness. But who formed us? The idea was obviously to create a Pan-African institution. So ATI is open to all African member states under the African Union. So all the 55 countries are eligible to join. It is also possible to get non-African states to join, private sector, corporations, regional economic blocs, and institutional investors that may be interested in our cause. With a view to, of course, create a public-private partnership that promotes trade and investment in Africa. Since we were created in 2001, we have done a cumulative amount of business worth 80 billion. Just recently in 2022, we did cumulatively business worth $8 billion. The member states of Africa gave us what is called a preferred creditor status. This is important to assure investors that should there be a crisis, and we've seen quite a few crises. Dr. Olomo mentioned the recent crisis that we faced, the COVID crisis, the geopolitical crisis, and obviously before that, the climate crisis, which is becoming existential for the entire continent. All of these crises sometimes do cause and result in crunches where either the governments or the companies are not able to honor their obligations, and that's where our preferred creditor status comes in. We do cover all sorts of risks, political risks, insurance risks, commercial risks for lenders and for traders and investors across the entire continent. Just to show it in a picture form, this map tries to portray where we are currently operating. So all the countries that are painted in blue, dark blue, are already members of our organization. And the others that are painted in either orange, if you look at it, or yellow, are in some form of advanced discussions of joining ATI. Our vision is to paint the entire continent blue. So as you can see, we still have a long way to to get to that position. But it just shows you that we are open to do business in the continent, and we will continue to get more and more members. We also have institutional shareholders, top of them being the African Development Bank and some of the key reinsurance companies like Africa Re, Kenya Re, ZEP Re in our shareholding. We also have outside institutions like ECGC of India. We also have SACE of Italy, UKF in our shareholding. Why these companies and institutions have joined us is because they see the potential that has been alluded to of Africa. I think we all believe that Africa is the next big thing. You heard about the continental free trade area, you heard about the infrastructure gaps. So lots of opportunity is being coming to reality in Africa, and that's why we are finding it easy to attract institutional investors in our shareholding. Also on the right, you see some of the institutional shareholders who are in advanced conversations with ourselves. We hope that one day we can add Korea Exim or Korea in one shape or form to this list. What are our products? Our products are basically, as I have already said, investment insurance to protect investors against payments by sovereign or non-payment by sovereign, action and inaction that may happen. And these things have happened over the years, and investors take comfort from our products. When it comes to commercial credit, we do provide what we call credit insurance, where we are also insuring against non-payment or delayed payments by lenders, suppliers, that you as business people would fully understand. When it comes to construction or major projects, we also do cover bid bonds, advance payment guarantees, performance and customs bonds that are necessary to get those big construction projects to happen. As you build these railway stations, as you build these roads, you do need these products, and we do come in to support either the local insurance company or yourselves directly. And we've also focused a lot on the climate, and I'll come back to the climate side. So the last product, I'll go into it a bit later on. These energy products that we have designed were in partnership with our partners from KfW, the German Development Bank, and more recently from the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation, otherwise known as NORAD. With these two, we are trying to unlock production and generation of electricity in a green way, dedicated on renewable energies such as wind, solar, hydro, and geothermal. We are also realize that there's a lot of misperception of risk or conception that most utilities do not pay in Africa. And we've introduced what we're calling the transparency tool that helps to give information about the payment history of utilities, so that as project promoters look at any country, they can actually check the data about the track record of a utility that they hope to supply electricity with. We also have another facility working with the support of the European Investment Bank, where we have put together a guarantee facility of worth up to $1.4 billion for clean energy investment projects. All these tools are also a response to the climate crisis that Dr. Oloma mentioned earlier on, and this is our efforts to help unlock projects that would not otherwise happen in the continent. As I said before, if you are concerned about political risks, if you are concerned about commercial risks, if you're concerned about performance risks, in the continent, we will be a partner. We can work alongside Korea Exim Bank. We can work alongside other interested insurers and providers of finance, so that those projects that you are proposing to do in the continent are able to come through and give a peace of mind as you invest. I've also put this slide to just cover some of the partners that we are working with, and my hope is that we will see more and more Korean companies coming into the partnership. I think on the first slide, you will see a few company like Samsung is there. So that's a Korean connection. We do work with them in Africa. We have some banks that we work with. We have reinsurers that we work with. And we also have partners that we do joint projects with. My hope, like I said, across all these sectors, we want to see private companies from Korea joining, international financiers from Korea joining, reinsurers from Korea joining in partnering with ourselves to provide these solutions into the continent. Since this is a digital finance conference, I wanted to also give a few examples of what we have been doing in enabling that sector to thrive. Yes, Africa has got good innovations. I see on the panel, some of the people who are championing the innovations, and we are happy to partner with them in a few countries. So if you look at this slide, you see on my right that working with this sector, we have helped to attract foreign direct investment in the telecom sector in Ethiopia, supporting the Japanese component of that consortium. So bringing competition, bringing digital revolution in Ethiopia is part of what we're doing. You cannot talk about a digital economy without telecoms and without the innovations that you might have already noticed about how Safaricom has been very innovative with interesting products that you hear more from one of my panelists here. We have also supported infrastructure, power, green power. We are associated with the largest wind project in Kenya, supporting the wind project there, so that you can actually talk about the digital infrastructure that enables the country to move forward. We are also associated in one way also with the Konza project in Kenya, and we hope that we can also provide our solutions to the investors that are going to take advantage of that Konza city project in Kenya. But this is also open to all African countries. I also thought I would put a few examples about what we have done. Again, in the digital space in Rwanda, working with Korea, we are ensuring against political events for this 4G wireless network in Rwanda. We do support some of the exports of minerals, and as mentioned by President Mahama earlier on, we need to see how we can take advantage of the resources that Africa has. So DRC has lots of resources that are required in the digital economy. Maybe it's time to attract value addition into DRC, because the source of the materials and mining that are supporting Korea are coming from there, and we've supported some of those trades. But the next stage of our discussion should be, how do we value add these materials or raw materials that are coming out of our continent, and in this example, DRC. We also support trade between Africa and Korea and other countries. And in Malawi, we're quite active supporting those trades. So this is what we are hoping you could get an interest in talking and working with us. Just some updates on our side. We are also inviting all of you. We have our annual general meeting coming up in July. For those who are able to come, we are sending an open invitation. You can reach out to us. We have an investor roundtable around that annual general meeting, where investors and governments can speak about projects and enable them to come to fruition. And we are hoping that some of you could also come, and the details are here. I have only 10 minutes, so I needed to be very quick and brief. But in conclusion, we are a partner, and we are helping you as investors to have a peace of mind. Using our products, you could actually focus on your business and not worry about those unforeseen risks that could occur in your spaces. So really, I want to thank everyone for giving us the opportunity to talk about our institution. And we hope that this is just the beginning, and we have more conversations as we go forward. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manuel Moses, for so eloquently, presenting the work, the excellent work, I may say, that ATI is doing with regards to investment in Africa. I can say that if you look at ATI, it is certainly our trusted partner in investing in the continent. And I can invite, investors joining this meeting to have faith and trust on ATI as a source of investment within the continent. Allow me now, and I can see also, some linkages with the excellent work that the Korea Exim Bank is doing. And so we are calling for a strengthened partnership to make sure that we are able to take advantage of all the potential that is there. Now we are moving to the next panelist, which is Mrs. Wang Jessie Kanjama. She's Director of Finance of M-Pesa, and I would not like to present M-Pesa again, because you can see that this company has been leading, globally, the digital drive that we are foreseeing today. And I would like to thank you, Madam, for taking your time to join this meeting, because we know that you are extremely busy with regards to the agenda that you have to accelerate digital transformation within the continent. So without any further development, allow me to give you the floor and to listen to your excellent presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So based on that, I'll just get quickly into it. The fintech space in Africa is really bubbling, and many times people ask us the question, is there room enough for everyone? Just by way of a high-level overview, you will see there is a vertical in the payment space, which very many of you are familiar with, and we play in that space. There is increasing lending penetration, and different lending products are coming out, which are really competing across the continent, making the cost of borrowing, the access of lending very, very affordable. As people get more sophisticated from a digital perspective, there is also very strong need to have financial services in the form of savings and investment. So that is also becoming a very niche area. And then, of course, there is a very big opportunity to partner in the enterprise space. And we're very keen as M-Pesa Africa to explore that space. So what you see there is just a flavor and a sense of all the players who are playing within that space. Now, when you think about Africa, people have different stories, and obviously they bring in the narratives from different perspectives. At M-Pesa Africa, we like to just simplify the African continent into 4 critical hubs. We talk about the southern hub, the northern hub, the western hub, and the eastern hub. This makes it easy for us to really penetrate the continent and work through a partnership framework to be able to scale our services. These insights show us that increasingly there are clusters across the continent that allow for people to do business in a very seamless way within the regions. And this has informed our strategy, and increasingly as we look at Africa, this is the approach that we as M-Pesa Africa will be taking. A very critical complement to the development of fintech in Africa is the developer ecosystem. And increasingly what is clear is that if we as Africa are to leapfrog into the next big wave of the digital revolution, is that we do need the skills. And so we will be really keen to sit at the table where increasingly people are talking about knowledge sharing, knowledge empowering, really empowering the African continent, which is very youthful, with the right skills instead of exporting critical elements or offshoring critical elements of the ecosystem outside Africa. One of the things that has been very exciting, and this has become very evident, is that the African continent is a critical hub for investment. If you look now at the way the investment comes into the continent, you will constantly see that there are certain countries that are targeted for that kind of investment. In the investment is Kenya, you find Nigeria, and you find other countries as well, even Ghana, South Africa. They are hubs where increasingly we find a lot of investment that's happening. We noted even during COVID, this did not slow down, and in fact, it really accelerated. However, there is still much more investment required in Africa, and the investment required in Africa is both in kind and in cash, and it also needs to be patient. So we are actually working with partners just to say, come into Africa, but also please come in with a slightly longer term horizon and come in ready to make the necessary inroads so as to be able to sustain the investment. But it does pay off, and it pays off very, very handsomely. Now, when you look at Africa, there are critical considerations. Now, when we started seeing money flowing in, especially from the US, one of the things we saw immediately was a number of players were coming in with low-cost models and disruptive models. And there's nothing wrong about lowering the cost of doing business. But what has become evident now is that increasingly, a lot of the enablers for the fintech space have become important, but also there is increased scrutiny on what the players are doing within this particular space. So if you're playing within this space, there are a number of parameters that one does need to consider. I'll start with one of the obvious and maybe most talked about issues, which is regulation. And what we are seeing, which is important, is that there are partnerships around regulation. There is digital development around regulation just to help players navigate the different ecosystems that they find themselves in. This is not something to be taken lightly, and increasingly what you find is there's a lot of convergence of regulators coming together to provide more oversight, especially recently with all these cryptocurrency challenges, some of these exchanges defrauding customers. There's a lot more scrutiny of what is happening in the digital currency space. We also then need to take into account that even if you come in with one use case, increasingly you do need to diversify your business because there are very many other complementary or adjacent offerings that you are able to provide. it is difficult to work in the digital space without really taking into account the infrastructure that exists. The infrastructure, as you well know, is the phone, which is becoming strong and central to every digital interaction. But also you talk about things like power, you talk about things like the cost of internet. Those are critical enablers that allow for you to be effective in this space. So as you look at these parameters, they are not supposed to be showstoppers, but what they do increasingly help you understand is what is your core capability and which other complementary capabilities do you then need to leverage on in order to be able to scale your business. Now, one of the things that is becoming interesting is that there definitely are different players with different strengths in the market. So when we look at the players in the market, we see increasingly that there are those who are very strong B2B players. And for me, the B2B space is a very underdeveloped space within Africa. So within Africa, there has been a lot of financial inclusion, a lot for the individuals and the consumers. But what you increasingly find is that it is time for us to bring the other part of the ecosystem on, and that is the merchant ecosystem. So the B2B players are critical, and they provide important bridges and corridors for business in that area. We also have the niche players. They've looked at the ecosystem and they've seen the digital silos that exist, and these players come in and they offer very important and very niche solutions. You know, the likes of Paystack, which are very, very successful and are growing extremely well and increasing their presence across the continent. Then you have the ecosystem players, and the ecosystem players have leveraged off other frameworks, but are beginning to increasingly lock opportunities to scale and merge with other ecosystems. So when we speak about M-Pesa Africa, we increasingly see ourselves as an ecosystem player. Now, just based on regulation, what we increasingly find is that it's not a vanilla solution across the continent. Mobile money is exciting. Payments is a very interesting space, but they're different models. So one of the things that it is important for people to note as they look to venture into Africa is to understand that depending on the kind of regulation, that there are different ways in which the mobile money game is played. But what is important is that there is room to partner, there is room to co-create, and there's room to enter with different use cases in order to build a framework to be able to work effectively within the ecosystems that you find yourself. What I find interesting is that you will see regulators copying very strongly what they think is a framework to enter into their countries or to work in their countries. So it's not that you have to struggle, but you'll see similarities and you begin to understand these are the competencies or the capabilities that will drive your growth within the region. Obviously, Africa is rising. It was Africa Day yesterday. And just on the screen there are very important statistics to show you that this is the continent now to put your focus on and to invest. So what is true about Africa is that it is a youthful population with very, very strong growth. What is clear about Africa is also its strong economic potential. What is evident is that in the next 10 to 20 years, there will be a lot more innovation, a lot more opportunity, and a lot more collaboration coming off this continent. So those are just statistics for you to get a sense on. As you do your business in Africa, as you look at the African continent, you are literally spoiled for choice because it's either the people or the markets or the economics, and eventually a lot more will be coming together as people figure out what really works for them. So now I come to the land of my birth, which is Kenya. And I've heard a lot of talk about so many wonderful countries, but I'm proudly Kenyan. And I would like to invite a lot more of the Korean companies to come into Kenya and partner with us. Our president is very, very determined about building our ecosystem. We are very proud of the fact that we are runners. We're very proud that mobile money has got its home in Kenya, but we want to also increasingly attract foreign direct investment. So I won't belabor the point. Our country is beautiful. It has the sea. It is close to Ethiopia, which I've heard you mention severally. We are close to Tanzania, which I've also heard you mention severally. Uganda. So please don't don't leave us out. Kenya is hungry for growth. It is hungry for investment, and we love our people, and we welcome the world. Now, thank you. So I'll talk a bit about M-Pesa Africa. M-Pesa Africa is home to 60 million customers. We have about 760 merchants. 803, just to be accurate, 760 agents. Now, I want to really emphasize that we are home to a very large distribution system in Africa. It means that we can connect you through our distribution agent ecosystem, merchant ecosystem, and we're very, very open, especially when people come into the country, whether they be startups, whether they be businesses. There is always the need to think about, how do I distribute? How do I move? How do I manage my logistics? So this is a service that we're offering. We are increasingly looking at merchants, and we are very determined to grow the SMA ecosystem through bringing more and more merchants online. What is very clear is we have a merchant app, we have a merchant wallet, but we don't have all the solutions for the merchants. So this is an area where we are very, very, very keen to partner, because a lot more of the jobs that are going to come in the future are going to come from the SME side of the African ecosystem. Lastly, again, we do have developers that work off our APIs, but we are seriously short of developers. So I'll be very open and very frank when I say we are calling for support and similar thinking around the developer ecosystems, certification of these developers, and really growing the developer ecosystem. There's a lot of excitement about startups, but remember, the raw material for the startups is the developers. And if you're short of those developers, then you will have an incomplete ecosystem. So we need to sort out the issue around developers. We need to also sort out the issue about not just going online, but doing more secure business online. There is a lot more fraud that's happening, a lot more cyber risks that are taking place. So it is exciting to be a startup, but there are some serious issues that need to be considered, and these issues need to be handled through a much more collaborative framework than exists today. So I just thought I'd play a small video just to take you through the journey of how M-Pesa started, just to give you a flavor of what we are so proud about. So I'll ask that the video is played so that we are able to just understand. So that just gives you a sense of who we are. So in the interest of time, I'll just say we're very glad to be given the opportunity to work in Korea. We've identified areas of interest in fintech, edutech, health tech, agri-tech, and we're very open to exploring these areas with our Korea counterparts. It's an honor to have been invited to this session. We've learned a lot, we've appreciated a lot, and we'd just like to say asante, and there's more to come. Thank you for welcoming M-Pesa Africa.
Thank you very much, Madam, for presenting this wonderful experience of M-Pesa. We certainly got the points where you said that Africa is seen today as the hub for investment, and we really encourage people to understand that the continent is open to continuously, widening its investment attractiveness to, make sure that we are giving room to more investment and productive investments. The conclusion that you also drew with regards to the opportunities that are lying there to co-create and to make sure that we are building a stable and sustainable ecosystem of digital, payment systems is really appreciated. So we really encourage, Korean counterparts to engage with you for further discussions. In the interest of time, allow me now to move to the next panelist, which is Dr. Segun Ena. He is an internationally well-known fintech, prominent leader. He is currently the chairman of the Global Banking Education Standard Board, and he has an extensive experience in developing fintech in the world. So allow me, with no further development, to give the floor to Dr. Segun. Doctor, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I want to also join others in thanking Ambassador Wonji and the team in Korea African Foundation for inviting us again to this summit, following the wonderful 5th Seoul Dialogue on Africa that we attended in December 2022, during which time Africa FinTech Network signed the MOU with 3 institutions, including the Korea African Foundation, including RX Infotech, the user-centric artificial intelligence company in Korea, which is raising about $10 billion to focus on artificial intelligence for Africa. And of course, the Korean FinTech Association, which we are developing a lot more collaboration in that respect. I also thank President Mahama for the beautiful opener that made, exposing the potential that exists in Africa, particularly in the area of digital technology. And Kanjama has said a lot in terms of the fintech space in Africa. So I'll just focus on a few tips as to some of the things that need to happen in terms of Korean-African partnership, particularly focusing on the topic of partnering to achieve the Korea-Africa digital vision, because both Korea and Africa have their own digital vision. Of course, if you look at the statistics, if Africa were a country, it would be the 6th or 7th richest country in the world based on GDP, while Korea is the 10th largest economy in the world. But of course, when you look at the population, 52 million Korea, 1.3 billion in Africa, it means that Koreans are richer individually when you look at per capita compared to Africa. And that's where the strength of Korea lies in terms of what they can do for Africa, in terms of providing the finance, while Africa has the manpower. So both parties have comparative advantage in terms of what it can offer. And we have seen, Kanyama talked about the fintech development in Africa. Africa in the last 3 years have produced, for instance, about 7 tech unicorns. Unicorns are companies valued at over $1 billion. And 6 of these are in Africa. You talk about the likes of Flutterwave in Nigeria, Wave in Senegal, Faori in Egypt, and so on and so forth. Whereas Korea has only one unicorn, and what could have been accounting for that is because of the population. So with digital technology, it's the volume that matters, the number of people. So there lies the opportunity that Africa provides when you talk about market access to fintech or digital-focused companies in Korea, partnering with African companies, investing in them to provide market access. And of course, Africa also provides the people that are necessary. And strategic partnership between South Korea and Africa hold great promise in terms of the collaboration that can leverage on the fast-track implementation of the Africa Digital Transformation Plan. African Fintech Network is a network made up of national fintech associations of African countries. We encourage every African country to set up fintech associations that are made up of people both on the supply, organizations on the supply and the demand side of digital technology. We have banks, you have fintech companies, you have big techs, you have international organizations, you even have law firms that are focusing on digital. We talk about regulation and issues like that. In every, we dimension fintech to have about 21 sectors, that we should work together towards achieving the kind of digital growth that we expect. So far, we've been able to set up national fintech associations in 34 countries, and most of the active ones are Fintech Association of Nigeria, for instance, where we have over 400 members, including all the banks, all the big tech companies, and so on. We have Association of Fintech in Kenya, Ghana Fintech Association, Rwanda, Tanzania, and so many, Egypt, Morocco, and so on and so forth. And our goal is to be the advocate, to be the voice of the fintech ecosystem in Africa, both within Africa and to the world, and to focus on advocacy, focus on capacity building, issue of skilling. We talk about the challenge in Africa. We have a large number of young people, highly educated, but the skills are limited. So they need to have the skills. Mr. Kanyama talk about, programmers and so on and so forth, because you need those skills. Without those skills, you cannot really achieve the kind of transformation that we are looking at. So area of collaboration that we see include the area of mobile payment. For instance, M-Pesa is a good example of African countries that have really done very, very well. I mentioned others like Fauri in Egypt, Paystack in Nigeria, Flutterwave also, in Nigeria, and the kind of things that they are doing. So much that Africa has the largest number of mobile accounts, in the entire world, and we are still scratching it on, the surface, because about 57 out of 100 Africans do not have bank accounts. So that means the prospects are still there for financial inclusion for more people. There lies the opportunity for partnership between Korea and Africa. And Africa Digital Vision, actually, the key driver is the Africa-Free Continental Trade Area, which we were, we were told about what AFCTA, is all about. And Cynthia also mentioned the fact that, the protocol on digital trade and so on will be released in July. So Africa is moving in terms of ensuring trade among Africans, and all this will be driven by digital. So the digital vision is very, very important. The African Digital Transformation Plan, of which African Fintech Network provided a lot of input, is aimed at making sure that we promote digitalization to foster economic growth across the continent. And we commend UNECA, African Union, ADB for the work they have done. All these are partners to African Fintech Network. We partner with all the continental groups so that we can support them, bring the resources within the fintech ecosystem in Africa to support that growth and ensure that the proper plans are in place. So the focus is to increase access to digital technologies, by people in Africa, promote digital literacy and education, and adoption of digital technologies across various sectors. And when you look at this, Korea also has a digital development initiative and Korea digital plan. And we believe that the experience that the the experience of Korea can be used to support Africa in leapfrogging to ensure that we go through a faster rate in ensuring that we deliver on the promises that Africa should be doing. What are the areas of collaboration? Knowledge sharing and capacity building is very, very important. We mentioned that in terms of the number of people that we have and the need for the young people in Africa. Africa has a median age of 19 years. And the young population made up of about over 60% of the African population, but they need to increase their skills base so that they can be much more productive to support the growth in Africa. Infrastructure development. Infrastructure is very key. Power, digital infrastructure in particular. Africa's cost of data is one of the highest in the world. Israel has the lowest, about 4 cents per gigabyte. I think the country with the lowest in Africa is Algeria, 48 cents. A country like Mauritania is $3 per gigabyte. So it's very expensive. These are very expensive in Africa. This is because the digital infrastructure are not where it should be. So with a lot of support and funding coming from Korea, we can reduce or lower the cost of these digital things and make it available to more people in Africa so that we can produce the kind of result that we want. Investment, and financing is very, very important. We were shown the chart of investment. The amount of money, for instance, in the fintech space, the amount of money that was raised in 2021 is more than the total of the 6 previous years put together. Even in the COVID year, we have seen how COVID has transformed, supported digital transformation in 2020 and 2021. And we haven't seen nothing yet because there are still a lot of things that are coming up. As fintechs are moving away from payments, they move away from lending and so on, moving to new areas using modern technologies, artificial intelligence, blockchain, robotics, and so on and so forth, to transform finance. So the opportunities and potentials are huge as you look at the future. Technology transfers and innovation is very important. Africans are very innovative, so support and working together with Korea will help in moving this forward. Policy and regulatory frameworks. There's a lot to learn from Korea, and I believe Korea also has a lot to learn from Africa. We, African Fintech Network, we work with the Association of African Central Banks, which is the association of all the 41 central banks in Africa, providing some form of support in terms of capacity building and letting them understand exactly how it operates in the digital place. Because innovation is always ahead of regulation. So we need to bridge that gap between innovation and regulation, or between innovation, regulation, and policy. We also engage with governments as well in terms of letting them know exactly the mindset of the young people of today and the kind of thing. So that whatever regulation that is coming up will be regulation that advances and promotes innovation and make things happen. And we are leveraging on the partnership we have with the Monetary Authority of Singapore, which is one of the leading regulators in terms of promoting and advancing innovation in the digital space. Multilateral cooperation is very essential. Korea, Africa can have platforms like the UN, World Bank, and so on and so forth to do a lot of stuff. Conferences and events. We need events, summits like this, particularly focusing on digital. I know events like an event like this is general, but we need to focus on events that promotes engagements in the digital space, given that it's one of the fastest areas that can, because digital affects everything, both public sector, private sector, affects every sector of human efforts, education, health, and so on and so forth. So a lot of efforts will be given at Future something about how digital can enhance the growth of Africa and the growth of Korea, as well. Formal development of mobile payment systems, access to huge talents. I talked about the talents earlier on. Africa is 1.3 billion today. By 2050, it will be 2.5 billion. By 2100, it will be 4.5 billion. So Africa is the fastest growing population, for a continent, in the world. So there lies, and And the market and access to the market is very important when you're looking at your product and where to make things happen. Benefits of Korea-Africa partnership, market potential and opportunities, investment into the African tech ecosystem. We need more patient capital that can help to propagate growth. A lot of the funding that are coming, about 90-something% of funding coming to Africa, fintech and digital space today, are from outside of Africa. All the unicorns that we see we have in Africa are not African companies. They are companies that are owned by foreigners. So we need to, as we are driving funding from Africa, and kudos to organizations like African Development Bank, African Bank, and are providing African-based capital, we also need to dilute the ownership, of the digital organizations in Africa by bringing money from the East, from Korea and so on and so forth, so that we can get the perspective from this side of the world as well. To conclude, I want to talk about an interesting project that we are working on. African Fintech Network. We got a grant recently. We signed a grant request on 4th of April with the African Development Bank. And the whole idea is to set up an Africa Fintech Hub, which will be a one-stop shop where anybody looking for information about fintech in any African country will have that. Because as of today, there's no that one-stop shop. You receive reports from McKinsey, from Boston Consulting Group, from KPN, talking about different things. But we need to be able to tell the story from the African point of view. So the African Development Bank has supported us with that grant, which, when it is concluded, will provide a robust platform, which will be online real-time, changing every second, every minute, in terms of information to investors, information to government, to regulators, and also for knowledge exchange. We hope that that project will be concluded in the next 18 months and will be a game changer in terms of support for the growth of the digital space in Africa. I think a lot of things I've mentioned about the African Bank, perhaps, and of course collaboration and knowledge exchange. So in conclusion, I want to say that partnership between Korea and Africa in the digital sector is mutually beneficial, as it has the potential to drive economic growth and development in both regions. African financial services space is growing and growing at a very, very fast rate. And this is the time for us to deepen the relationship between Korea and Africa. And I think a recommendation I want to leave you with is to say that we should be able to set up what I would call a Korea-Africa other committee of experts or experts group that will focus on how we can actualize all the great ideas that we are generating from this discussion. Otherwise, it just become a talk show if we do not work together. Not Korea just coming up with a plan, but Korea working with Africans to come up with a digital growth plan that will support the development of the Korea digital transformation plan, as well as the African Africa digital plan, so that we grow together, getting the benefit of synergy to achieve at least 2-digit growth every year, both for Africa and Korea. So I thank you very, very much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And I think the conclusion that you are drawing is fully in line, with the work that we are doing currently at the African Union Commission to make sure that from now to the next decades, we are able to have and to post, 2-digit growth with regards to, our ambition to accelerating implementation of Agenda 2063. You also called upon the summit to be much more focused on result in terms of what we can do to make sure that we seize the opportunities of the Africa-Korea partnership. And I think this is the center and this is key in driving sustainability in this process. Allow me now to the next panelist, which is Mr. Kojo Choi. He is described as a serial entrepreneur with more than 20 years of experience in the ecosystem. So Mr. Choi, I would not want to develop in presenting you because you are already a well-known, prominent entrepreneur. So the floor is yours for your presentation. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. I somehow felt that I'll be left with no time, and I'm inherited with deficit of 11 minutes. Please don't blame me if you have forgotten, if your coffee break is forfeited. I'll make sure my time is going to be quite exciting. And I think my dress itself shows that I've been able to achieve what I've come here to speak today about the marriage between Korea and Africa. Thank you very much, Mr. President John Dramani Mahama, for the very insightful and resourceful keynote speech. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Korea and Africa has a lot in common. Both histories and cultures are rich, colorful, and extended. The respect for the elderly and values for family in Korea and Africa will actually top the whole world. You remember the son of Africa, the former Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan. It is not by chance that he handed the United Nations top position to his son of Korea, Mr. Ban Ki-moon. We can go on and talk about how Korea and Africa are closely related culturally and historically. My name is Kojo Choi, whereas Kofi Annan's Kofi is a name given to a boy born on Friday. My name Kojo stands for a boy born on Monday. Whilst Kojo is a very popular Ghanaian name, Choi is an equally popular surname in Korea. So as my name suggests, I was born in Korea and raised in Africa. In other words, I was made in Korea and processed and deployed in Africa. In Korea, the most famous chocolate is called Ghana chocolate. If you're a Korean in this room, you must have actually eaten one, and actually every single Korean must have had a share of it. I learned that not every cacao bean is the same. Chocolate manufacturers can make chocolate from any cacao bean, but unless Ghana cacao beans are added, it then actually starts to taste and smells like a real chocolate. I actually brought some chocolates here. If you want to really come for a justification, you're welcome. But I'd like to share this with my three panelists. You can actually try it and be justified with what I'm saying. But what I'm trying to say is that there are certain ingredients that are must needed, and such can only be found from a unique source. In other words, Korea and Africa's unique ingredients must be identified and brought together. As a Korean African, having been born in Korea and raised in Africa, I would like to welcome you to this journey of ingredients finding exploration mission, paradigm shift to finance 4.0, looking at Korea and Africa's digital finance landscape, thus provide visions for both parties. As the topic suggests, Finance 4.0 require the involvement of all the latest technologies such as AI, blockchain, biometric authentications, and what have you. Clearly, Korea is far advanced in the infrastructure and technological advancement. However, if you're talking about its implementation, adoption, and usage, Africa is clearly ahead. Till today, Korea's digital finance is heavily dependent on legacy banking systems that is still, and this can easily be proven by long queues in legacy banking halls in the streets of Seoul. This is as a result of steady and systematic introduction and implementation of new technologies and infrastructure coupled with an aging population who do not want to embrace the new way of doing things. However, in Africa, the challenged availability, accessibility, and affordability of such legacy systems promoted leapfrogging technologies. For example, Africa never experienced beepers, and others call it beepers. We went straight ahead in deploying mobile phones. We were hardly even introduced to the 2G network, but moved straight to 3G and 4G networks that provided fast and reliable internet across the continent. Are you aware that mobile internet quality in Africa is superior to that of Europe and many other parts of the world? Affordable and fast internet-ready Africa has made it itself ready to embrace Finance 4.0 better than any other part of the world, thanks to the youngest population in the world and, ironically, unavailability of legacy banking infrastructure. The biggest banks in Africa are no longer conventional banks, but telecommunications companies, as the majority population are now enrolled into financial inclusion via the use of Momo and M-Pesa. Today, more than 60% of Africa's population is under the age of 25. By 2030, young Africans are expected to constitute 42% of global youth. I hope you heard it right. It is expected that in 2030, over 40% of global youth under 25 years are Africans living in Africa. We may comfortably predict that in 2030, half of the world's population under the age of 30 are Africans. I mean, 50% of the world population under the age of 30 will be Africans in Africa. If Bible only had two different races, the Jews and Gentiles, the United Nations may comfortably adopt two races in their book, Africans and then the rest of the world. Therefore, if Korea is talking about the future market, it has to be nowhere but in Africa. Korea's preparedness and perfection to finance 4.0 is the best in the world. Africa's market and readiness to adopt Finance 4.0 is the largest in the world. We are on the journey of exploration of finding the right ingredients for Africa and Korea. Korea's readiness with the best technologies and Africa's largest and youngest ready to adopt market seem to be the perfect and right ingredients we are all searching for. In many different ways, these same thoughts have been spoken yesterday, today, and will be spoken tomorrow. I hope and believe that my submission today as an African Korean should repeat the message ever so strongly to cause not only interest, but real actions for the marriage that happened between Korea and Africa. I have founded many companies in Africa and have run them. The biggest challenge in doing business was to have access to financing. And even if one is able to access financing with a finance cost of 30 to 40% per annum, companies would rather decide not to borrow, but to grow marginally. According to the International Finance Corporation, IFC, the credit gap in sub-Saharan Africa is estimated to be around $331 billion US. You heard it right, $331 billion US for sub-Saharan Africa. I pondered and have been wondering what propelled the exponential growth of GDP for USA and countries like Korea. And I realized that the introduction of credit is an instrument that played a great role. However, in Africa, we are still into barter trading, and this time not with cowries or physical goods, but with cash. I further studied and learned that out of many categories that institute credit, the past payment history carries over 1/3 of the entire weight of the instrument called credit. I realized the only way to create credit in Africa is to start harvesting payment data from individuals and companies. This will not only promote accountability, which is one of the major issues that Africa is facing, but also create a foundation for credit introduction. Banks in Africa are routing their payment processing outside the continent through a third-party processor sitting outside the continent, thus causing valuable payment data losses. It is for this reason I founded PaySwitch 7 years ago. I've been hearing about people talking about Paystack and other companies. PaySwitch is based in Ghana, and we used to process and settle for Paystack coming from Nigeria. I'm envious of Africa, Nigeria being the big elephant, but I must assure you that Ghana is also a leopard, part of the big five of the Savannah Safari. Yes, and we welcome African Continental FTA because this will help us to go beyond the countries. We provide third-party payment processing for Ghana's largest banks today. By providing local processing solutions for banks, not only did we lower the cost of payment processing, but have started harvesting precious payment data. Today, we have gone further than just payment processing. With the payment data that are harvested, we have gone ahead with the original vision and dream of providing credit solution. Currently, we are working with telecommunication companies and banks to implement buy now and pay later programs. In Korea, it is very well known as halbu jedo. with one vision that I conceived called credit. We are working to empower individuals and businesses to close the gap, the credit gap of 331 billion US dollars. Kojo Choi and Pay Switch are pursuing their dreams called Credit for Africa. And today, we offer ourselves to you as a good sample and motivation for you also to dream and follow your dreams and passions. I repeat, Korea's preparedness and perfection to Finance 4.0 is best in the world. Africa's market and readiness to adopt Finance 4.0 is the largest in the world. Let the marriage between Korea and Africa take place. And when? The time is right now. And I say thank you, and let's go for the coffee break.
Thank you very much. Yes, the time is right now to make sure that we are able to seize the opportunities that you alluded to. This will allow us to certainly bridge the finance gap that you presented in your last slide. So allow me now to turn back to the room, because I need to be guided at this point in time, because certainly we have exceeded, the time that was allocated for the session. But what you can see, Your Excellency, John Dramani Mahama, what you can see, Ambassador, Wookie Leo, and also my Director Jamet Grib, you can see that there is a keen interest on this subject. You can see how passionate were the presenters when they introduced the matter, and we really are at the center of what we need to do to make sure that we are strengthening the ties between Africa and Korea forward to achieve sustainable development. Allow me to hand back to the room for questions and answer if that session is still, to be planned, and we proceed to the conclusion. Over to you.
Okay. 지금 장내에 계신 분들께서는 혹시 질문이 있으시거나 코멘트가 있으시면 손을 들어주시면 되겠습니다. 저희가 마이크를 전달해 드리도록 하겠습니다. To our distinguished guests here in the venue, if you have any comments or questions to raise, please raise your hand so that our staff members can hand over the microphone to you. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies and distinguished guests, good morning, or good afternoon rather. I would like to thank the panelists for this rich, I would say, panel discussion. And I would like to thank really my brother from another mother, Mr. Kojo, for his last remark, because since we've started the discussion and this panel was around financing, I was hungry to hear somebody speak about SME financing, and it took my brother to actually talk about that and present what he's doing with his company. I just wanted to say that when we look at the figure of $330 billion in terms of credit gap, if we add the needs or the financing needs for micro and unregistered businesses, because you will understand that when we're talking about the African private sector, I mean, more than 90% are made of SMEs, MSMEs, and the informal sector. So when we add the financing needs of those segments, we go up to $750 billion of credit gap. So it's important to actually understand, or let's say, look at some kind of innovative ways of financing our SMEs, because this is always the elephant in the room. And if we want the African Continental Free Trade Area to make sense, we have to really come up with the right mechanism, bringing in the FDIs, the Fintech solutions that we have, the development partners, to see the insurance. I think we had the ATI that also came up and discussed what they are doing in terms of providing insurance mechanism to mitigate, because we know that SMEs are risky. And so all the financial institutions, yes, have their regulations behind, so they have to be careful in terms of what type of facilities or products or services they provide to SMEs who are actually very risky. But we really need to maybe learn from what also Korea has done to support innovation, to support startups and businesses, to see what kind of trade finance facility that can be put in place for SMEs that would like to trade under the AFCFTA. And here I would like to say that when we look at the institution, the AFCFTA, we have a convening power. We are not a banking institution, we are not a credit institution, but we can come up with our convening power to actually put in place a facility with the right institutions. And we have also Afrexim Bank, with whom we are working to develop what we call an Africa Trade Gateway, which is a platform that will bring together insurance, which will bring together also payment solutions and also a marketplace for our SMEs. So let's look at, again, the type of innovative mechanism that we can work on so that we put in place a trade finance facility for our SMEs that makes sense for affordable access to finance for our SMEs to trade on the continent and with the rest of the world. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. Mr. Chair, have you listened to the question? Did you have any problems in listening to the question from the floor? If not, as a presenter for this session, I would like to ask for the answer to Mr. Che, because that question was addressed to you first. And then I assume that if there's any comments to add up from the Kexim Bank, you can also have the floor after him. Thank you.
It was more a statement and suggestion and addition to what we've all said. And rightly you said, we have to quote from very well recognized bodies such as IFC. And IFC's credit deficit only for whatever they have been able to count was $331 billion US. Now that is going to go up to $700 billion US. Anybody who is going to play a game in this pool of $700 billion US, just think about it. And we've all gathered in Korea because Korea, we think you are a great partner for Africa. $700 billion US worth of credit gap. At the moment in Ghana, if I can give you one example of how we are closing this gap, we formulated a whole ecosystem for MTN, which is a telecommunication company, together with a bank. We actually brought one insurance company. So we are running the credit engine and solution at the core of it. So MTN is now being able to offer their mobile handsets on buy now, pay later basis. Yes, MTN is a big company. Yes, we have an insurance company that has come in to cushion the financier being a bank. So within such formal system and setting, we're actually delivering, bridging that gap, shortening the gap. But what about the SMEs? So we have spoken to a few investors, and some of the investors were quite intrigued and happy to bring their own financing that actually goes straight into the consumer through our company. But this time, it is going to be a very careful selection of those who will qualify for the credit that is going to be given. So yes, there are so many ways we can look at it, and I can assure you that Kojo Choi and PaySwitch, we are playing our small bet in Africa.
Would you like to add up a comment?
Yes, I just want to make a brief comment on that. I agree with Cynthia that the traditional financial institutions have failed us in terms of providing the required finance for SMEs. But in the spirit of the innovation that we've seen happening, a lot of things are now going on. Apart from the development banks that have been set up in the various countries focusing on small-scale businesses. For instance, in Nigeria, there's the Bank of Industry, and more specifically, the Development Bank of Nigeria that was set up, and a few others also exist in other African countries. A lot more focus is now put on this. Nigeria, two weeks ago, launched the HiDice, which is a $620 million funding, specifically for startups and young companies. And countries in Africa, I think about 7 countries in Africa today, have set up what we call the Startup Act, which is supposed to ensure provision of funding, support for new companies and so on and so forth. And also companies that want to scale up. I think we are bringing innovation into funding for startups in Africa, which will help. And I think as we move on also, we believe that the regional bodies, including the AFC, FTA Secretariat, will help in the area of one of the challenges that we see with African companies wanting to operate across Africa in terms of the business passporting, ensuring that I know it's part of the FCTA, but if we can bring it forward, it also help a lot in terms of exposing African companies to other countries and make them bigger and also make them more attractive to funding. So as we move on, I mean, I was a banker for about 3 decades, was MD, was a CEO of a bank. I know that the traditional banks have failed in terms of this kind of support. So I think the future holds very, very good promises. Thank you.
Right. It seems that our moderator is not he's not able to listen to us very well from the remotely. Let me check on that. Mr. Chair, can you hear us loud and clear? The question and answers?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Very good. Then would like to receive another question from the floor. Yes, please. And after this question, the moderator will continue to chair the session. Please go ahead.
이쪽으로 마이크, 이 앞쪽에 계시는 남자분께 넘겨주시겠어요? 가장 먼저 손을 드셨습니다.
With all due modesty, it's not a question as much as it is rather a suggestion. I heard with a lot of interest each and every one of you, but I think there is some kind of a missing aspect, which is what I consider is much needed, is a revolutionary attitude. No matter what subject we're talking about, when it comes to Africa, please let us never forget that we are talking about the paradox by far on Earth. We're talking about the richest continent on Earth, but at the same time, in many situations, poorest countries and absolutely inadmissible, unacceptable situation. So thinking about 4.0 in the Industrial Revolution and 4.0 in finance, let's investigate some avenues so that whomever, be it Korean or from anywhere else, looking at the situation and the specifics today and tomorrow, some years down the road of the free trade agreement and the dynamics of what is going to be happening and accelerating, let's think about different ways, totally different from business as usual as it is being done elsewhere, either in South Korea or in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I wish that you could make a concluding remarks with that suggestion, because it is now high time for all of us to pave the way in a very innovative way. So in the interest of time, we're afraid that we can't receive any more questions or comments from the floor, so we'd like to listen to the concluding remarks from our session chair. Please.
Thank you very much, co-chair, and thanks to the wonderful panel that we had today, because we were able to have, insightful contributions on how to better frame the Korea-Africa partnership going forward. This is critical because, as I said in my introduction remarks, Africa stands today at a critical point of its history, and there is need for us to engage firmly in the process of transformation that we are foreseeing in the framework of Agenda 2063. What we usually say at the African Union Commission, and what is the motto of our department, is that a peaceful and prosperous Africa, it is not only an asset for Africa, but it is an asset for the world. And then there is need for us to work together to make sure that we are able to take the opportunities of all the advantage that the African continental free trade is bringing together. As we saw in the presentations, digital transformation is certainly evolving at a pace that is incredible, but there is need for us to concentrate now on the key challenges that are still, hampering the development of that sector, to make sure that we are able to bridge Africa's credit gap as it was presented in the last presentation of the session. Let's take into consideration the fact that the Korea-Africa partnership is certainly one of the strategic partnerships that the African Union Commission is conducting at the moment. So the key takeaway that we have from this session is that we should focus precisely on results and make sure that we are able to deliver tangible, transformative processes and outcomes at the end of these interactions. We should not only organize summits for meeting, but we should organize summits for strategically linking, investment and people to make sure that we are able to take advantage of all the possibilities that are lying out here. I see room of opportunities between M-Pesa and the excellent work that is done by, Kojo Choi. So there is need for you to make sure that at the end of this session, you are able to continuously working together. And I can relay the call that was presented by M-Pesa Director of Finance with regards to taking advantage of the ecosystem that the continent has already created. I also see a room of opportunity linking more deeply Korea Exim Bank with African Trade Insurance Agency in such a way that we will be able to de-risk precisely the environment, the business environment in Africa, and make sure that we are able to attract more investment within the continent and accelerate productive transformation in key sectors such as energy, infrastructure, agriculture, and all the sectors that are linked to the industrial revolution. So you see that the digital revolution 4.0 that this session was pushing forward is really central in terms of accelerating progress towards shared prosperity. Allow me to stop here because in the interest of time, I would like to sincerely thank you for the opportunity to moderate this session. Thank also my very good friend, His Excellency Woo-Ki Leo, for the opportunity of strengthening the partnership between Africa and Korea. Thanking also our keynote speaker, His Excellency John Dramani Mahamat, and also thanking my director, which is sitting in the room, and to tell him that as he can see, we are moving forward in this very particular, partnership that is a strategic partnership going forward. Thanks to the organizers of the session, thanks to the excellent interpreters, because we were able to listen to each other's. So thank you very much, and I hand back the floor to you. Thank you, Manuel Moses, and thanks to all the panelists for their excellent presentations. Have a wonderful day in Korea. Goodbye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Please give a big hand to our chair and to our speakers on the stage. With that, I would like to wrap up session 3 of the 2023 Korea-Africa Business Summit, and we would like to have a short coffee break until 4:15. It's for 10 minutes. You can continue your conversation and discussion with coffee and refreshments, and we'll see you back in 10 minutes at 4:15. Thank you very much.